All right. So, we're doing something a little different. Ryan introduced this last Sunday. I don't think he really explained exactly what we're doing. I think it was more of a teaser, okay? So, we started our Culture and Values series last week, and we want to take an opportunity for this month to talk about what our culture is at New Hope and what it is we value. And I think everybody here inherently understands that every group of people has a culture, right? I think this is something that Ryan talked about. Like when I think about New Hope, one of the pillar families at New Hope is the Collins family, and I've gotten to know them over the past decade. And one of the things they value is like pretty much every Sunday they get together as this giant group and they eat together and they watch the Bills play. And like it just sets the tone for what their whole family is about, okay? And just like an individual family, a church family is very similar. We have things that we value. We have things that produce our culture. And those are the things we want to talk about this morning. And just to like pull back the curtain, a lot of this stems from the fact that Ryan joined our congregation now, and I'm going to butcher this. Was it a year and a half?
Almost two. It'll be 2 in March, right?
Okay. So Ryan's 2 years old in our culture, okay? Yes. And I think one of the things Ryan did when he joined this culture, our culture here was, okay, what's this family that I'm joining? Because Ryan carried with him some things that he cared about, obviously, or we wouldn't have hired him. He has vision for where he wants this congregation to go. But he was joining a family, and it was important to him to ask the question, okay, what's the family that I'm joining? It's kind of like you get married, right? You join your wife's family, or you join your husband's family, and you're going to adopt the things they care about. And so in those 2 years, Ryan has been diligently creating a list of some of these things that we have inherently valued over the years, things that we are newly valuing, and maybe some things that we are hoping to sow into valuing. And so that's where the list that you have in front of you came from. This was in your membership packet. And so our goal over the next few weeks is to talk through some of these in kind of like a family meeting style. A couple things I'll say before we really get started. Just to be clear, I don't think you would confuse this, but this is not a statement of beliefs, right? This is not our doctrinal statement. Our doctrinal statement is on our website. I'd recommend you check it out, but that's not what you will be finding on this list. That's one thing. Second thing, this is not a comprehensive list of kingdom values, okay? And we don't want anybody to assume that something that is not on this list doesn't matter. I cracked a joke on Thursday. Feeding the poor is not on this list. Does that mean Jesus doesn't care about that? Of course not. That would be silly. But we have some things that are unique to us in terms of values that are creating our culture, and we're doing an active job of trying to define what those are so that we can sow into them. And Jesus cares about this stuff. If you read in Revelation 5, verses 9 and 10, I'm not going to read it, but at the end, people from every tongue and tribe and nation are going to worship Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think the people in Uzbekistan have services that look like ours? Do you think they inherently live out cultural, like kingdom culture the same as we do? Yeah. Do you think Jesus loves them? Absolutely. So every congregation has things that make it unique, and like that's the value of doing it in groups of people, is that people teach you more about what Jesus is like through what they value. Mm-hmm. So there's my introduction. We're going to start by talking about, let's see, third value on this list, we speak life. And I'm going to aim this question to Ryan to start. But could you just talk a little bit about what does this mean, and like why did this make it onto our list? And then maybe others could chime in. How do we cultivate this as a congregation?
Absolutely. So our little write-up says, we speak life. It's our native tongue. We use our words to encourage, celebrate, and call out the glory and destiny in others. And this is so foundational for, I believe, the entire kingdom, like the reality that God has created. Like, the book starts with, in the beginning, God created, and then he proceeds to speak. And we get a kind of a summary or another look at that in John chapter 1, where it says, in the beginning was the Word. So the very first thing there was word, was communication. You could call it language. And the Word was with God. So relationship. That's cool, right? Communication and relationship. And the Word was the light. And the Word was life, and the life was the light of all people. So we get a little glimpse of what this language of God is like. It's a language of life. Does that make sense? So this is not unique to us. It's all followers of God. This is our language, the language of life. Why it sticks out to me for New Hope is because of really our prophetic history and our DNA as a people. Again, in the membership packet, you can read kind of the bullet points of our prophetic history. And it starts with some general things that God was doing in the nation. And then it zeroes in on Lima, New York, where IQ Spencer is moved to birth this Bible Institute or movement, really, called Elam. And in 1958, an Elam instructor, Chester Gretz, drove past this building on this road out here, and he heard the Lord say, "It starts there." So the reason we're here right now is because of prophetic word. We were founded on the now voice of the Lord. So that's really key for us, right? Yeah, that's the why. What else was there to the question?
I'm going to ask you how, but I'm going to pause because I forgot to mention, we are doing our best to gather questions as we go through this. So mostly the questions would be you guys giving us feedback in terms of things that we say and maybe questions that come up. And mostly that would be feeding into future weeks. But if you look up on the screens here, we have a number that you can text your questions into. So as the service is going, if you want to get out your phone, you're like, oh, that makes me want to ask something. Please send it in to us, and we'll try to work it in with what we're doing this month. So yes, the second part was, well, how do we do this?
Right on. So I'm going to ignore that and go back to more. While you were talking,
chance to think, right?
Yeah, that was your mistake. One more thing about why this is so important is I feel, I know this is a bold statement, but I feel that the people of God on the earth today are in danger of losing our language. I really do. And you can trace the loss of a culture back to the loss of a language, yeah? When a people group stops speaking their native language and stops teaching the next generation to speak that language, that's the beginning of the end. And I very much believe we are in danger of that today. And here's why. Because our language has been infiltrated with foreign accents. And here's what I mean by that. I'm not talking about in the natural, 0% in the natural. I'm talking about in the spirit. And especially in recent years, there have been figures, leaders who have been promoted on the cultural scene who have some kind of nominal association with Christianity. And that association has been echoed and parroted over and over again. We've been told, this person's a Christian. This person's of the family of God. They speak our language. And we've heard this from people we trust and people we believe. And so we start listening to this person. And this person, and it's not just one person, okay? These figures that are blasted in front of us culturally, they do not speak our language. And our language has been infiltrated by a foreign accent, one of which is called mockery. And it has become more and more common. We've picked up this accent, Christians. We've picked up this accent where we are far too comfortable mocking those we disagree with. And we got Bible to back this up. Like, read the book of Jude. You will tremble if you're paying attention, because Michael, the archangel, didn't even dare to rebuke Satan. And it says he didn't dare. Instead, he said, the Lord rebuke you. That's you and the Lord. And now we're living in a day where we have Christian figures who are reviling people, calling people made in the image of God demons and satanic, or just outright mocking them. And that accent has gotten into the church, and it is anti-life. It's not our language. So that's there's a positive reason why, and there's a negative reason why. And we have to fight for our language. Yeah.
I want to kick it over to Ben or Krista. Do you guys have any accents you want to make on what Ryan said, responses, thoughts? Put a punctuation mark on that one.
Can I just check? I think this is something that I am not great at in general, is like speaking life or positivity. It's something I have been focused on a lot in the last couple years, and just for me, like feeling the difference in my spirit when I hear, it started out when I hear other people speaking life or being super encouraging, lifting others up, can be one of two responses. Like, either if it's like really positive, you could like want to mock that, like you said, or you could be envious of that, like, man, I wish I could talk about people in that positive light. So just feeling that in my spirit over the past couple years of envying those who speak life on a consistent basis, and realizing that that is a deficiency that I have, and trying to chase after that. It just, obviously, like you said, there's a ton of scripture to back this up, but even in my heart, I just feel the difference of like life growing when life is spoken, and seeing how it can change other people's lives when you speak life into them.
Right on.
Yeah, and I mean, there's tons of scripture that talks about how we talk about each other, right? In Ephesians, it says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. No unwholesome talk. And I know I'm guilty of unwholesome talk, right? We all are. And I think all of us up here, none of us claim to be perfect in any of these categories. It's something we're all striving for. Yeah. But there's an element of this We Speak Life category that says that we encourage, celebrate, and call out the glory and destiny in others. And that's the part that kind of like stuck out to me as I was preparing, is we call out the glory and destiny in others. And when I'm around a person where that is like so much their focus, where they just like see, Barbara Ann Redmond is really good at this. I don't know if she's in the room, but she is like
teaching kids right now, pouring
incredible
into them.
with calling out the glory and destiny in other people around her. And she's just constantly speaking life and seeing like the gifts and the callings that are in people. And I know when that has happened for me and someone has just seen something in me, my heart has just leapt, and it's given me the courage to step out in something that maybe I kind of thought that I was gifted in, but I wasn't sure. And then someone confirming it is like, yes. And like, that's what we're doing with like our next generation, our teens, and even my leaders around me. Is like, my job is to call out the destiny and the calling in those who I'm surrounded by, those that I'm leading. And so as a church, as a body, like, let's do that. It's so, I don't know, it's just so powerful and transformational. So much more comes from that than all of the negative talk and like pointing out everyone's faults.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to jump into teaching here, so I'll just go straight to the point. The kingdom is a now and not yet phenomenon. And in 1 Corinthians, it says, it is faith, hope, and love that remain. Like, the best tool you have for producing hope in people is your words to them. That is the way to instill hope in people, is to see their destiny and speak it to people. So if we want to be New Hope, if we want to give people hope, the best tool we have is our words for them.
Right on, right on. I don't have much to add in the how, because Krista really described it well. And I don't feel like our starting point is like prophetic ministry lines. You know, like, thus saith the Lord. That's not our starting point. Our starting point is those simple, like, I see this in you, and just speaking that. And I think we can all relate to that feeling of hesitation. Like, I have all kinds of feelings in there of like embarrassment of like, am I gonna sound dorky telling them that,
Yes.
like, you're really good at this? Yeah, yeah.
It's okay, though.
Right, it is. And just, so there's a how of choosing to do it anyways. Like, oh, they probably know this. You know what, they probably don't. Or I see this all the time, like the gifts that are most obvious to everybody around you are often the things that you doubt most about yourself. And that person needs us to speak to that and say, you're called to this. And last thing I want to say about speaking life for right now is it doesn't exclude calling one another out and saying, bro, that's not your calling. That's not, you're not being what God has called you to be. There's a better way. It doesn't exclude that. That's actually life. I'm going to tell a story that I didn't ask if I could tell. and I feel like it segues well into healthy communication. But my friend Ben here, a few weeks back, he had some things he wanted to share with me about our worship ministry. Is this okay if I still? Okay. And if you don't know, like right now I'm kind of acting as worship director, so I'm in rehearsals with our teams. And for those of you who haven't worked with me in that context, I'm a different Ryan. I'm a different Ryan in the worship team context, and I can be very like crack the whip, and yes. And my brother Ben took me out to lunch. So, I mean, well, whatever. Way to a man's heart. And he just shared with me some honest reflection, just kind of holding up the mirror and going, Ryan, you're awesome at this. You're obviously gifted here. Sometimes you come across this way, and it affects people this way. That is so incredibly helpful to me. Do I love hearing that? No. Because
Like you did. Smiling and
yeah. But I would rather hear it than not hear it, and not be aware. And immediately that helped me start making some adjustments. And what was cool, this doesn't always happen, is I made some adjustments and I got immediate feedback from others who didn't know about the conversation. And they were like, Ryan, that was really helpful, the way you helped us in rehearsal tonight. I'm like, so I just want to put that example forth as that is also speaking life and also a great example of healthy communication. Yeah.
Cool. So we're going to bounce to our next topic. It's on the back of your sheet, and it's listed as healthy communication. So I'm going to turn this one to Ben. Kind of same questions I gave to Ryan on the first one. Why is this on the list? Maybe how could we implement it, if you just want to read it and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, this is great stuff. I should have read this before I prepared. Some of it lines up with what I was going to say, so that's good. Healthy communication, we speak well of one another. When we have conflict or offense, we speak directly with that person. We apologize and forgive. We make our needs known. We listen. We respect differing opinions. So, I mean, why this is important? it's massively affects each and every life, like how others are communicating with them, especially in the church, because we are supposed to be life givers and bearers of the Word of God. So there's so much hurt in the church. People coming in, whether they're saved or unsaved, about how they've been treated or communicated with in other settings, maybe even here. Like, we're not immune to that, but it's just so influential in people's lives, whether it's speaking life or receiving, like, the hurt you feel when you find out someone has been backstabbing you and you weren't there to hear it. Like, it's just so influential. It's a broad subject, obviously, healthy communication. I don't have time in the 45 minutes that you've given me to talk about that. It feels way better giving that joke than receiving it. Everyone's like, I feel your uncomfortableness with that. But basically, healthy communication, as I'm going to talk about it, is only referring to in the tough stuff, in the differences, in the conflict, because let's face it, communication is easy when we're all like, love is in the air and we're feeling good and we all agree about everything. When we talk about the need for healthier communication, it's usually when we're disagreeing. So I kind of split it into 3 little points. I'll try to blast through them quickly. As a disclaimer, I'm going to read some scripture for each of these. There is context to each scripture that you should read yourself because it gives a slightly different color, or these things were said in the context of dealing with church unity or doctrinal soundness. But I don't have time to read the context, so just encouragement for you guys to do that if you'd like. So the first thing I have, ironically, Ryan and I did not talk about this, but initiating tough conversations. And that one specifically was a hard one for me to initiate. And I thought about asking you if I could share it, but I didn't because it felt like it would have been like weird to say I did this thing great. But let me just read some verses for you about initiating these tough conversations with people. Matthew 16:15. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. Matthew 5:23 through 24. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Something I found interesting, these 2 passages in Matthew. Matthew must have been like a conflict expert because he spoke about it twice. The first one is saying that one of them is saying if someone has wronged you, it's your responsibility to go talk to them. The next one says if you know of someone that you've wronged, it's your responsibility to go talk to them. So there is no letting you off the hook. It's all of our responsibilities, whether we were the one being wronged or the one wronging someone else. Like, the Bible gives precedent and tons of other verses for taking it to them in a healthy way and trying to talk through it. Just a few quick other ones. Proverbs 27:5 through 6. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses from an enemy. In Ephesians 4:15, rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. So I feel like in our culture, we become so uncomfortable with tough conversations because it's so easy to just blast it out on social media and like link to an article that if the person that wronged you sees it, they'll get the picture that like this article relates to them. And we don't want to like go to someone one-on-one and say, hey, this hurt me. This is how it made me feel. And it's kept us, in my opinion, this is opinion, maybe it's in the Bible somewhere, but it keeps us from forming deep relationships. And a thing that has been especially hurtful, I feel like, that spawns from this is we go to a new church, and it's the honeymoon phase. Everyone knows the best things about us. We know the best things about everyone else. We're all friends, we're happy, we're whatever. And then year 2 hits and year 3 hits, and like the troubles of life start to come through, and our faults start to come through, and the things that we aren't good at start to come out in conversation. And it's too hard to have those conversations, so we just pack up and go to the next church because then we can start all over with the honeymoon phase. And we have a 2-year runway before we have to get deep enough with someone to have those conversations. So my experience and the easiest, not the easiest, the most readily available way to practice this is in your marriage if you're married. So this is where it happens most in my life. I did just have that conversation with Ryan, and it was hard for me to like initiate that. Like, it's not in my comfort zone. But Krista and I have a lot of these conversations of, especially, you know, as we grow older in our marriage and realize things that, but my experiences, the most beneficial conversations in life are those that we most have been avoiding. And it's not going to be easy, but it is beneficial, and the growth really comes from that. Moving on, the second thing is the flip side of that coin. That's how we receive the other side of that conversation. When someone comes to us and points out a deficiency or something that we said that hurt them, and constructive criticism. And to Ryan's credit, like, he did that amazingly in our conversation. Like, I'm sure it didn't all feel good, but he was very receptive, wanting to know more, tell me more about that, trying to understand why I was saying these things. Or anyways, just wanted to point that out for you. So James 1:19 through 20. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Proverbs 18:2. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. So I'm notoriously bad at this part in our marriage conversations of receiving the feedback. The human tendency, I would say, and my tendency is to go on the defensive. That's our culture's tendency. All you have to do is open Facebook, and all you see is the defensive, the defensive, the defensive. Krista's much better at this than I am, so if you have issues with Krista and I, you should go to her first. Confront her about that. If it goes well, you can level up and talk to me, okay? And then it'll be good practice for me. But in the past couple years, I joined a mastermind for my business of men and women who are, some of them are Christians, some aren't. And one of the rules to play is that you have to be open to feedback. You have to be open to criticism. And at first, it was really weird, but so refreshing. And now I'm getting used to it. And then I'm going to church things, and this isn't happening. Like, we aren't open to criticism. We are just defensive. And I'm like, man, this hurts, because I'm in this group, like now a couple groups where this is the norm of like growing and learning and asking, like, what can I do better? How can I grow? And it's unfortunately not common in the church that I've seen, and that's something that we really want to see grow here. But yeah, just seeing that group of people looking to grow, asking how they can do better, has really inspired me in that area over the past couple years. So this does coincide with our vision little thing here, but I had here, what if instead of defending ourselves in those conversations, we stopped and apologized for the hurt we had committed, whether we knew we did or not? What if we apologized? What if instead of making our case, we got curious and asked why this was so important to the person that confronted us? They're putting a lot of trust in you to initiate that conversation, so the least we can do is like not attack back in that moment. All right, number 3, moving on. How we talk about others when they aren't around. This is a huge one for me. The first 2 points were kind of like making sure you have the conversations, whether it's initiating or receiving the conversation. This third one is, who are you having the conversation with? Because I don't know about you, but I am having these conversations, whether it's with the right person or not. You know, usually with your spouse, that's the easiest one to like, oh, Ryan did this today. Isn't he the worst? Oh. Like, we're having those conversations with our spouses, with our friends, with our significant others, with our kids, and like, that's not necessarily, like, I don't know, the spouse, it's whatever, you bounce things off each other, but it's better to go straight to the person you have issues with. So here's a couple verses. Proverbs, I mean, if you just read Proverbs, there's 100 verses on this, but the words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. They go down into the inner parts of the body. That gossip, like, unfortunately, like, it feels good in the moment. Like, you're feeling a little better because this person is, like, did something stupid or isn't as good at something as you were, and it feeds something deep and dark in your soul. Proverbs 11:13, a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. Titus 3, remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, not even those you disagree with. I put that part in. Speak evil of no one, avoid quarreling, be gentle, and show perfect courtesy towards all people. And luckily, the next verse goes on to say, but Facebook is open season, go wild. Okay. Obviously, it doesn't say that. But then further down in that chapter, like, there's some strong language. It says, as for a person who stirs up division, after warning him once and then twice, have nothing more to do with them. Like, and there's a lot of other strong language in the Bible that I found that I knew before, but was reminded preparing for this about, like, how serious this issue is of, like, gossiping, talking behind people's backs, slandering. It's something that I really need to work on myself. And the check in my spirit kind of goes like this, I've found. Me and Ryan are having a conversation. Patrick comes up in our conversation, and we, like, talk about Patrick a little bit, something dumb he did the other day. You know, there's plenty of options. So then, like, we go our separate ways. We're feeling good. Then I'm like, oh, wait, I think Ryan was supposed to meet with Patrick for coffee tonight. Oh, man, I hope Ryan doesn't tell Patrick what I said about him. Then at that point, I'm like, that check in my spirit of, like, oh, if I'm feeling that, it was a conversation that I probably shouldn't have had at all. Or if it was a serious issue, I should have gone straight to Patrick with it. So that's kind of, it happens more often than I'd like to admit, but that's how it manifests in my life, is just feeling that check. And I know you guys have a lot to say on this, so I don't want to take up all the time, but those are my 3 points that were most on my heart.
So in a second here, I'll bounce it to Ryan and Krista. You guys can add. Just to peel back the curtain, when we looked at this list and said, which one of these is their energy to talk about, this one ranked highest on it. Collectively highest for the entire team. But just to demonstrate that, if I'm not going to ask anybody to share, but by a show of hands, who here has been hurt in a relatively significant way by the way the church communicated in the past? Ouch. Like, this matters so much if we're going to be kingdom people. Ryan, Krista, do you guys want to add anything?
I've got plenty.
Go on.
So one of the things I've been realizing lately is our words, they can create a safe space for people to learn and to grow. And I've been learning that because Ryan is actually phenomenal in this area. There's been so many times where he has withheld from saying, he speaks so highly of everyone in this room. Like, honestly, how your pastor talks about you is like, I don't know if he speaks so highly of everyone. Even if there is conflict happening, things that need worked out, he honors you and he is for you 100% all the time. And so that has spoken so much to me in the last 2 years of working with him. Ryan has created a safe space for me personally to be like, oh, I can share, I'm, having insecurity about this, or I can share, I would love to be the youth director. Stepping out, it's given me courage. And so when we create that safe space for the people around us, it gives opportunity for growth. It gives opportunity for them to feel like, this is a safe person. I don't hear them talking about other people. I can actually bring my problems to them and know they're not going to share it with the next person that comes along. And so I just want to encourage you guys with that is like, let's create that safe space, because I've seen so much growth in my own life. I feel like thriving because I feel like I'm in this environment now where I know what I am sharing. And like these two as well, and Nicole, like, it's an amazing team to work with. They do such a good job at keeping private things private. They're not sharing your stuff with the people around them. They are so phenomenal at that. And then also kind of speaking to the other side of like when we share things with people, when we don't go to the person we have the grievance with and we share things with someone else. I want to talk about that someone else person, which we've all been in that spot. We've all been at the position where someone is coming to us and they're talking badly about someone else, or maybe they're just venting. Is how often do you encourage them to go and confront the person they're talking about? How often do we do that? There's a responsibility on our part if we're receiving that information. I know sometimes I think, for me personally, it feeds that dark place that Ben was talking about, because there's something in me that's like, oh, they're bringing me the goods about this person. That means I am so amazing and so awesome. But no, you're not, because most likely then they're going to someone else and talking about you. But like, we have to hold each other accountable in that. Like, yes, we want to be there for our friend, but we're not really helping them. We're hindering their growth. We're stunting their growth. We're stunting our own growth. We're stunting the growth of the person that they need to go and confront. I'll be on. Sorry, I'm getting worked up, but this is something I'm very passionate about. Because honestly, in the church, in my entire life, I've had very few people come and actually approach me about a conflict. Ben, one of the reasons I fell in love with him is because he approached me and he confronted me. And then 3 days later, I was like, I think I have feelings for him. Yeah, so for all you guys out there.
Watch out if you approach a single girl or boy.
But seriously, I could probably count on maybe one hand how many people have actually come to me in love and confronted me on a way in which I've hurt them. And I'm 39 years and so few people. Like, I'm not perfect. I know I'm not perfect. Like, if you're married, you know you're not perfect. Even last night, he just told me a few things. He's like, is that the right motivation? I was like, fine, whatever. But we've got to get better, because like, recently I've realized some things about myself. I confessed that to some friends, and they're like, yeah, you kind of do that. And it's faithful are the wounds of a friend. Yeah. And since there has been that confession and they have confirmed it, it has stuck in my heart so much. And I was like, I don't want to do that thing ever again. I don't want to hurt that person ever again. I don't want to hurt the people around me ever again. And so guys, we're stunting ourselves. We're creating this cancer in our society around us, not just the church, but around us, this cancer that is just, it's breeding a lot of negative things. So, yeah.
So good, Krista.
I think she might be upset that she didn't get that point to talk about.
Maybe that'll be
main
February's
thing.
sermon series. We can let Krista go for 5 weeks.
I have a few kind of random points just to throw out on this. As I'm listening to the conversation, I imagine questions that might go through our heads, like the subject of who's the right person to talk to, and what if I'm terrified of that and I'm not ready? Are there no other options? And so I want to throw this out to you. Having people in your life that are removed from the situation, and preferably even removed from the relationship, so they don't even know the person that you're having conflict with, that's a great person. I'll call it a third-party person. So I've got those people in my life. I have Sonny with the Radiant Network. He's a pastoral oversight for us. He doesn't know any of you. It doesn't matter if I tell him somebody's name, and I can get wisdom from him. Like, here's the situation, if I don't know what to do yet. Does that make sense? And it's not gossip, because he doesn't know who you are. It doesn't affect your relationship. So find those third-party people, trustworthy people. They need to be trustworthy, mature people,
Right, the one thing I would add to that is, in some situations, I feel like it is also healthy and acceptable to go to someone who isn't going to spread it, in the attitude of, I am looking for advice on how to handle this situation with this person. Yeah. I'm not just like telling you about it so we both feel good.
Right on. Somebody confronts you. Ben was talking about the dynamic of like the instinct to be defensive. And here's a little tool, take it or leave it. But somebody shares something with you that you did not want to hear. And like you can feel like the roar rising up in you of like, I'm ready to fight or whatever. Here's a little tool you can use. I need some time with that. So you don't have to engage right now.
if you know you're not ready, like if I talk now, bad things are going to happen. But don't use that as an avoidance technique. Don't use I need forever with that and we're never going to talk again. That's not what that means. It means I need a little time to process, get my head around this, and then I can talk to you. Regarding apologies, never say this: I'm sorry you feel that way. I'll repeat that. It's real important. This is not an apology. I'm helping you. I really am. I'm giving you some good advice here. Never say this: I'm sorry you feel that way. You can't apologize for my feelings. You can't apologize for my thoughts, for my actions. You can only apologize for yours. So if your only apology you can offer right now is I'm sorry you feel that way, don't offer one. Totally serious. Take your time with the subject and figure out what you can take responsibility for. And even if I didn't intend to hurt someone, I can still apologize to them. So I did something or I said something, I didn't intend to be hurtful, but they were hurt. And I play this game in my head and I go, well, should they have been hurt? It doesn't matter. They were. And I can apologize for that. I can apologize. I am sorry that I hurt you. And I don't have to, make all these excuses of why I didn't mean to or whatever. I can just own that. Okay, last thing is, what do you say when something offends you in the moment? And we're talking about building towards healthy communication in the moment or even later. Here's another little tool you can use. Oh, I don't like that. Somebody says something or does something, and you haven't processed it all yet. You don't know all your feelings about it. You just know you don't like it. Just saying that, I don't like that. Or later, when you've processed it, how do I start a conversation like that? Here's a simple way. Hey, I didn't like it when you. And it doesn't have to have much more than that. I just didn't like it. So there you go, some tools.
Yeah. So Nate, want to come on up? So we had planned on touching on 3 topics, but we also want to respect the attention span of everybody here. So we're going to push some of that into our next time, which we're going to do some more of this next week. And I also want to acknowledge we did receive a few questions that really were hit on this topic, and we'll consider those and figure out how we can wrap some of that into what we do in the future here. So we just want to...
Can I just say something, Patrick?
Yeah, of course.
I feel like this might feel weird for some people in the room, feels like we're talking about practical stuff in church. And I just want to point out that this is spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
The Bible talks about this stuff
Thank you.
a ton. And I think whether it's church culture or our culture in general has made it weird to talk about real life, practical things in church. But it's so important, and it is a spiritual thing. So we've almost
Thank you.
there's over spiritualizing things. I feel like these are topics that we have de-spiritualized, where we're
Yeah.
oh, that's a practical thing, not a spiritual thing. We should talk about that in our support group, not in church. But this is very spiritual stuff.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought it back there, Ben, because we're talking about culture. And culture is when values have legs on them. And we're actually doing something. We're actually living out values, which means actions, right? And when those things become our habits, it's just what we do. We just speak life into each other. And I've said this before, it's my dream, and I see it in measure, but it's my dream that when people come into this building, you're just oh, I know I'm going to get encouraging words today. I just know because that's the language we speak. You know, things like that. That's culture, and it absolutely is spiritual.
So if you guys would stand, we just want to give a short opportunity to respond, and we'll close here in a moment.
Him our one thing. We give Him our burdens, our hatred, everything that's between us and others. We surrender it to Him. So when you sing this, just think about the peace that He's called us to be in with the people around us. Oh, and I don't want anyone else, and I don't need anything else. You are my one thing. You are my one thing. And I don't want anyone else. And I don't need anything else. You are my one thing. You are my one thing. And I don't want anyone else. And I don't need anything else. You are my one thing. You are my one thing. And I don't want anyone else. And I don't need anything else. You are my one thing. You are my one thing.
I just invite everybody to hold out your hands. If what we were talking about, there's a theme there. If what we're talking about is something that you want to sow into, if you want to help build this culture where we speak life and communicate with kingdom values to one another, hold out your hands and let's just submit that before Jesus. You promised that out of our bellies would flow rivers of living water, and I believe that means out of our mouths will flow words that produce living water and hope in one another. I don't think it's an accident that this congregation is named New Hope. I choose to see that as a stamp of what you wanted our culture to be, that we could breed hope in one another. God, we look at everything around us and we see hopelessness. God, and we just say, use us to be vessels of hope by how we love one another, how we speak to one another, how we communicate and build healthy culture to one another. God, let that be a sign to people around us that you actually are in the midst of this people, that we love one another with our words. We commit ourselves to sowing into this, Jesus, and we say we don't even know all the details of how to do it, God, but we submit ourselves to you and say, do this as a work in our midst, Jesus. Help us build a culture that magnifies Jesus here in Rochester, New York. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll continue next Sunday. We'll invite you downstairs for a time of hanging out and eating, and otherwise, we hope you guys have a wonderful week. Be blessed.
You found me and you gave me something I never had. A love so strong and perfect it can never go bad.